Hey Pre-K, happy Monday. Mrs. Dean here with us. Sight word for the week. Our sight word this week, M-Y. My. Last week it was me, now it's my. Remember we were reading about Martha. Martha doesn't share. Her favorite word was mine or my, so there you have it. That is my toy. My dog is outside. I left this one blank, things we can make up. Something is my favorite. Disney World is my favorite. Chocolate ice cream is my favorite. Going to the park is my favorite, okay? So think of some things that you can use the word my. I assume you have all your books at home. Go find the M and the Y in some of your books today. Show it to mom or whoever is at home today, and keep looking for our sight words. They're all over the place. Let's get to Wilbur. Here he is. We are getting so, look at that. We just hit that little bit and we're through. And when we stopped last time, they had gotten Wilbur in his crate, in the truck, and gone off to the fair. So now we're at the fair. And this chapter is really kind of funny. It's called Uncle. Okay. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky, and they could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons, and they could hear sheep bleating in their pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, I always like to do this, "Attention, please. Will the owner of a Pontiac car license number H2439 please move your car away from the fireworks shed?" "Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "Can I too?" said Avery. "I'm going to win a doll by spinning a wheel and it'll stop at the right number," said Fern. "I'm going to steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one." "Can I have a balloon? Can I have a frozen custard and a cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop?" said Avery. "You children be quiet until we get the pig unloaded," said Mrs. Arable. "Let's let the children go off by themselves," suggested Mr. Arable. "The fair only comes once a year." Mr. Arable gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes. He gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. "Now run along," he said, "and remember that money has to last all day. Don't spend it all in the first few minutes, and be back here at the truck at noontime so we can all have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick at your stomachs. And if you go on those swings," said Mrs. Arable, "you hang on tight. You hang on very tight. You hear me? And don't get lost," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "And don't get dirty and don't get overheated. Watch out for pickpockets," cautioned their father. "And don't cross the racetrack when the horses are coming." The children grabbed each other by the hand and danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round towards the wonderful music and the wonderful adventure and the wonderful excitement, into the wonderful midway where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, and where they could be happy and free and do as they pleased. Mrs. Arable stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed. Then she blew her nose. "Do you really think it's all right?" she asked. "Well, they've got to grow up sometime," said Mr. Arable, "and a fair's a good place to start, I guess." While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate and into his new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They saw the sign, "Zuckerman's Famous Pig." Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy. It was shaded from the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte, watching her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed a post to the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skim milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched clean straw into his pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arables walked off toward the cattle barn to look at the purebred cows and see the lights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see a deep freeze. And Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and some fun on the midway. And here's a picture of Fern and Avery heading off to the fair. You can see those are those swings. They're really fun if you've ever been on the swings. They're good and scary. There's my favorite, the Ferris wheel right there. And here's all the fun, different places where you can play games and get things to eat. Fairs are lots of fun. As soon as the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. "It's a good thing you can't see what I see," she said. "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." "Well, maybe he's older than I am and has had more time to grow," suggested Wilbur. Tears began to come to his eyes. "I'll drop down and have a closer look," Charlotte said. Then she crawled along the beam until she was directly over the next pin. She let herself down on the drag line until she hung in the air just in front of the big pig's snout. "May I have your name?" she asked politely. The pig stared at her. "No name," he said in a big, hearty voice. "Just call me Uncle." "Very well, Uncle," replied Charlotte. "What is the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig?" "Sure, I'm a spring pig," replied Uncle. "What did you think I was, a spring chicken? Ha ha ha, that's a good one, huh, sister?" "Mildly funny," said Charlotte. "I've heard funnier ones, though. Glad to have met you, and now I must be going." She ascended slowly, returned to Wilbur's pen. "He claims to be a spring pig," reported Charlotte, "and perhaps he is. One thing is certain, he has a most unattractive personality. He's too familiar, too noisy, and cracks weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though, Wilbur, on account of his size and weight. But with me helping you, it can be done." "When are you going to spin a web?" asked Wilbur. "This afternoon, late, if I'm not too tired." So, there's Uncle Wilbur. It's big competition. There's little Charlotte hanging down in front of him, asking him his name, listening to his weak joke. "The least thing tires me out these days," said Charlotte. "I don't seem to have the energy I once had. It's my age, I guess." Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen, and she seemed listless. "I'm awful sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte," he said. "Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." "Perhaps," she said wearily, "but I feel like the end of a long day, clinging upside down to the ceiling." She settled down for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. All morning, people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him, to admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, and his kind and radiant expression. Then they'd move on to the next pen where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favorable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help overhearing these remarks, and he couldn't help worrying, and now, with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought, "Oh dear." All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew hot. At noon, the Zuckermans and the Arables returned to the pig pen, and then a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arms and was eating Cracker Jacks, and Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. They were hot and they were dirty. "Isn't it hot?" said Mrs. Zuckerman. "It's terribly hot," said Mrs. Arable, fanning herself with an advertisement. One by one, they climbed in the truck, opened their lunch boxes. but nobody seemed hungry. "When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman. "Not till tomorrow," said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared carrying an Indian blanket he had won. "That's just what we need," said Avery. "A blanket." "Of course it is," said Lurvy, and he spread the blanket across the top of the sideboards of the truck so that it was like a little tent. The children sat in the shade, and they felt better. And after lunch, they stretched out and fell asleep. And that's the end of that chapter, friends. So now you know who Uncle is. He's the big pig in the next pen. Our next chapter will be called In the Cool of the Evening. So we'll find out what goes on at the fair in the evening. This one has a lot about Templeton. And it's quite a long chapter, so we probably won't finish it all tomorrow. It may take 2 days. We'll see. Oh, wait. I made a mistake. This one's short. It's the next one that's longer. Okay, so we're getting very close to the end here. I'm going to miss this book when we finish it, but we'll find another great book to read. So, Wilbur, and I hope you have a good Monday, and we'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.